My name is Captain Mark Eldridge. I'm 47 years old, and for almost 2 decades, I flew the skies for North Star Airlines. 18 years in that cockpit. 18 years of red-eye flights, emergency landings, weather delays, overnight hotels, and quiet sunrises at 37,000 feet. My life was in the clouds, and I loved every minute of it. I gave them everything. My youth, my time, my health. While other dads were at soccer games, I was thousands of feet above the Pacific. While most folks were unwrapping presents on Christmas morning, I was navigating through a snowstorm trying to land safely in Denver. I didn't complain. Not once. Because for me, it wasn't just a job, it was a purpose. There's something deeply humbling about knowing 200 souls are counting on you to get them home safe. And I took that responsibility seriously. But none of that mattered to the new CEO. He came in with a fresh haircut, a Wall Street smile, and a stack of spreadsheets. No aviation experience. No background in safety. Just one goal: cut costs, boost profits. I was just another number to him. A line item labeled, "Veteran pilot, high salary," in a red cell on his Excel sheet. I still remember the day it happened. We had just landed in Chicago. Smooth flight. Clear skies. As I was walking out of the terminal, my phone buzzed. A calendar invite. No subject. Just, "Executive briefing, HR conference room, 11 a.m. I walked in, and they were already seated. 2 HR reps, 1 guy from legal, and him, Mr. Derek Langford, the CEO in a $1,000 suit who hadn't flown commercial in years. He didn't even look me in the eye when he said it. "Captain Eldridge, effective immediately, your contract with North Star Airlines has been terminated." No thank you. No handshake. Just a printed folder, a dignified exit clause, and a security guard waiting outside the door. 18 years. Gone in 18 seconds. But here's the part that really stung. As I packed up my things, I passed by the break room. A few of the younger pilots were huddled around their phones, laughing. One of them glanced up, looked right at me, then whispered, "Guess the old man couldn't keep up." That's when I knew this wasn't just a firing. It was a setup. And the CEO? He had no idea that the people he thought were loyal to him weren't. He fired me thinking I'd just fade away quietly. But I had other plans. Because if there's one thing they forget about pilots, we don't just fly through storms. We prepare for them. I wasn't always like this. There was a time I believed in loyalty, in fairness, in brotherhood. And I want to tell you about the flight crew who stood by me before they made their choice. Before the chaos, before the betrayal, before I was escorted out like some criminal. There was a time when I believed I'd retire flying those planes. A time when North Star Airlines wasn't just a company. It was home. We were a family. I remember the early years like they happened yesterday. Back when I first joined, I was 29, straight out of the Air Force. I still had that rigid military posture, that "yes, sir, no, sir" habit that took years to loosen up. But the airline welcomed me with open arms. There was Captain Dana Lutz, the old-school lifer who taught me to feel the sky, not just fly through it. There was Marcia, our head flight attendant, who knew every passenger's birthday, allergies, and coffee preference. And there was Tyson, my co-pilot and best friend. We logged over 6,000 hours together in the air. These weren't just colleagues. These were people who saw me through my divorce, who sent flowers when my father passed, who helped me through nights when jet lag felt like depression. I met my second wife through the airline. Ellie, she was a scheduler. Kind, soft-spoken, always humming some tune under her breath. We started with post-flight coffee breaks, then dinners. Then I found myself rearranging my overnights just to land in the same city she was in. We got married after 3 years. Small wedding. Just 30 people. Half of them were crew members in uniform, clapping like it was a company award ceremony. Those years were golden. The kind where you're too busy living to know you're making memories. Late-night takeoffs from JFK. Sunset descents into LAX. Crew karaoke nights in Denver. The smell of jet fuel mixing with black coffee in the hangar lounge. I thought it would last forever. And I wasn't naive. I knew airlines went through changes. We had new VPs, policy shifts, safety audits, even a few layoffs during the pandemic. But through it all, the core team stayed solid. Loyal. So when Derek Langford came on board as the new CEO, I didn't panic. Sure, he looked like someone who hadn't touched an aircraft manual in his life, but I believed in systems. I believed in seniority, in track records and merit. He started making changes almost immediately. Shiny presentations. Corporate town halls with buzzwords like optimization, agility, and modern culture realignment. He replaced half of HR with people from his old fintech company. Started offering buyouts to veteran staff. Pilots with 20-plus years were suddenly encouraged to retire early. Still, I wasn't worried. I was one of the top safety-rated pilots in the company. Not a single incident on my record. Not one. In fact, I was just awarded Pilot of the Year the fall before he arrived. But I'll admit, the tone started shifting. Little things, like the way dispatch started routing me to less desirable flights, red ice, last-minute swaps, double legs through stormy cities. Like how my feedback suddenly started getting lost in the system. Or how Derek's people started asking odd questions at meetings like, "Do you see yourself flying in 5 years? Or are you thinking of stepping aside for the next generation?" At first, I laughed it off, until I realized they weren't joking. Then came the accidental email. It was a forwarded briefing sent by a scheduler who meant to copy HR, but copied me instead. Subject line: Senior Pilot Offboarding, Phase 2 Candidates. My name was on it. Right between two pilots who'd already accepted early retirement packages. And I hadn't been told a thing. I took the email straight to Tyson. He looked at it, looked at me, and said nothing. Just quietly handed me a list of flight crew for the next month. And that's when I noticed something strange. My regulars, Marcia, Dana, even Ellie, they were all being reassigned. Suddenly I was flying with substitutes. New hires. Temps. I didn't know it then, but they were isolating me, making it easier to let me go without a fuss. Still, I clung to hope. I believed that 18 years would count for something. That loyalty wasn't just a word printed on the company plaque. I wish I could tell you I saw it coming. But I didn't. Because even as cracks were forming, I was still waking up at 3 a.m., ironing my uniform, saluting the sky, and climbing into the cockpit with pride. The life I thought I had? It was already disappearing. I just hadn't opened my eyes yet. At first, I tried to tell myself it was all in my head. That email I got, maybe it was outdated. Maybe I was on that list for some procedural reason. I told myself that after nearly 2 decades of spotless service, there was no way they'd just throw me aside. I chalked it up to corporate noise, miscommunication, HR paperwork, anything that would let me sleep at night. But the signs kept piling up. The routes they were assigning me felt like punishment. I wasn't being given the cross-country or international flights I used to love. Instead, I was handed the scraps, last-minute connections, red eyes through weather-beaten zones, double shifts that didn't make sense on paper. And when I'd ask questions, the new scheduler, some 24-year-old kid who barely looked old enough to rent a car, would just smile and say, "Sorry, Captain, Upper Ops approved this rotation." Upper Ops point two words that started to feel like a wall I couldn't see past. I started noticing I was being partnered with unfamiliar crew. No familiar faces. No more Marcia. No more Dana. No Tyson. Just new hires, mostly younger, some of them not even finished with their probationary training. It wasn't just unsettling, it felt calculated. And Ellie, my wife, even she started acting distant. We used to debrief together every night, talk shop over dinner, laugh about crew drama, share little moments that only pilots and flight ops could truly understand. But suddenly, her phone was always buzzing. She was always exhausted, always swamped with scheduling crises. I thought maybe I was being paranoid, projecting my stress onto her. But something was off. Then came the training audit. They pulled me from an active flight and told me I needed to undergo a mandatory simulator test. No warning. No prior notice. Just a 48-hour heads-up and a cold email from someone in quality assurance I'd never met before. I showed up, did the drill, aced the test, and still, I got a report back saying I needed to revisit core procedures for operational alignment. What does that even mean? It felt like gaslighting in uniform. Like someone was slowly rewriting my record from model pilot to problem pilot without ever confronting me directly. But it was a conversation with Tyson that finally shook me. We met at a diner off the highway, the kind we used to hit after late-night landings. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept in days. I asked him if he knew what was going on, if I was just imagining things. He stirred his coffee for a long time, then said, "They want younger pilots, more tech-driven, fewer legacy contracts, less resistance." I asked him if he'd heard my name come up. He looked down, didn't answer. That silence told me everything. That night, I went home and sat in my driveway for over an hour before walking in. I just stared at the front door. Something in me didn't want to cross the threshold, not because I feared my wife, but because I feared what I might discover inside. I didn't recognize the feeling then, but looking back, it was the moment I began to accept that the life I'd built was falling apart. Inside, Ellie was already asleep. Or pretending to be. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching her breathe, wondering how long she'd known, wondering if she was part of it. That thought made me sick to my stomach. I hated myself for even considering it, but the doubt had been planted, and it was growing fast. Over the next few weeks, the pattern grew clearer. My paychecks had subtle deductions. My benefits access portal suddenly showed pending verification. I was taken off 2 major international assignments and replaced without explanation. The training department began sending me articles like "How to Embrace Change in Corporate Aviation" and "The Value of Making Room for the Future." Room for the future? What about the ones who built the past? Then, something I couldn't ignore happened. A crew manager slipped up during a handoff. I was reviewing the flight manifest, and she accidentally handed me a report meant for internal HR. Before I could return it, I saw my name, my file, a bullet point summary that read, Subject, Robert Gill. Age 47. Service, 18 years. Key concern, potential pushback against restructuring. Risk factor, medium-high. Action, Phase 3 recommendation, performance-based dismissal. I felt my hands go cold. Performance-based dismissal? They weren't just trying to nudge me out. They were building a case to fire me. Legally. Quietly. Strategically. That way, there'd be no severance, no benefits, no story to tell. I wouldn't be a veteran stepping down with grace. I'd be a liability written off. I spent that entire flight numb. I don't even remember taking off or landing. My mind was spinning with betrayal, with disbelief, with a cold and rising fury. And Ellie? That night, I asked her directly, "Do you know what's going on? At work?" She hesitated, then said, "It's above both our pay grades, Rob. Don't fight it. Maybe it's time." That broke something in me. That was the moment I realized she wasn't just watching this unfold. She was aligned with it. She'd always been the scheduler. She knew the shifts, the audits, the lists. She had access to everything. And suddenly, her distance made perfect sense. She wasn't just tired or stressed. She was complicit. I didn't say a word, just nodded, walked outside, and sat on our porch under the stars. I used to think the sky was the safest place in the world. But now, even the ground beneath me didn't feel like home. Something was coming. Something bad. And I wasn't sure I was ready for it. The fall, set up, betrayed and fired in public. I thought I'd hit turbulence before. But nothing prepared me for the crash they engineered just for me. I always thought if I ever left the cockpit, it would be on my terms. Maybe I'd throw a small farewell party with the crew. Maybe I'd crack a joke over the intercom during my last flight, get a round of applause when I landed, shake hands, maybe even get a plaque or a little model jet to take home. Something. Anything that honored the 18 years I gave to this airline. But that's not how it happened. It began with a sudden call. One of those dry, clinical emails that don't say much but feel like a blade. Captain Gill, report to Ops HQ for a compliance debrief. Attendance mandatory. No details. No reason. I knew what it was. Deep down, I already knew. This was it. The final move. I showed up in full uniform. Pressed, polished, professional, like I always had. Even as they tried to gut me from the inside, I showed up with dignity. Because that's what pilots do. We don't flinch. We don't panic. We face storms. I'd flown through lightning, through engine malfunctions, through emergency landings. But nothing prepared me for this storm, because this one was personal. They sat me down in a glass-walled conference room. 3 people were already there. 1 from HR, 1 from legal, and 1 from operations. Ellie wasn't there. I looked around, waiting for someone to speak. No smiles. No welcome. Just silence and files on the table. The HR rep finally began. Her voice was neutral, rehearsed, like she'd done this 100 times and had no clue what it meant to me. Captain Gill, we've concluded a formal review of your conduct over the past 6 months. Several reports have indicated deviations from standard protocol, as well as a pattern of insubordination regarding revised scheduling and operational shifts. Additionally, we've received written concerns from junior staff about your communication style and adaptability to evolving leadership. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Insubordination? Communication concerns? I'd mentored half the damn staff in that building. I was the guy they called when new captains froze under pressure. I taught some of those protocols they claimed I violated. I interrupted her. Calmly. I'd like to see those reports, I said. And I'd like to know when I was ever written up or warned. The legal guy slid a folder across the table. This is not a disciplinary hearing, Captain. This is a performance-based offboarding. Your severance has been calculated in accordance with Section 7C of your contract, assuming full compliance with the NDA enclosed. I opened the folder. There it was. A paper trail. Manufacturer complaints. Anonymous surveys. Misrepresented flight logs. One note even said I appeared mentally fatigued during a routine flight from Denver. That flight? I'd landed the plane during a crosswind with a malfunctioning indicator, and I got commended for it in the pilot group chat. But in this file, it was painted as reckless and potentially unstable. They were rewriting my legacy in front of me. I looked them each in the eye. My voice was steady, but my hands were shaking. Who orchestrated this? I asked. Because this isn't about performance. This is about replacing people who cost more. People with tenure. With ethics. With backbone. No one answered. Just blank stares and legal phrasing. I stood up. Slowly. Closed the folder. I didn't sign it. And that's when the final knife came in. The HR rep said, if you refuse to comply with the NDA and formal exit process, we will have no choice but to escalate this through official channels, including contacting federal aviation regulators regarding concerns raised in these reports. In other words, sign or we'll bury you deeper. They were threatening my license, my future, my name. I left the building without saying a word. As I walked out, I saw a group of crew members standing by the elevators. Some recognized me. Their expressions were strange. A few nodded awkwardly. One looked away. Another whispered something to her colleague. Like I was already a ghost. I felt like I was dying in real time. When I got home, I found Ellie sitting on the patio. She wasn't surprised to see me early. She just sipped her wine and said, "Did they tell you?" My throat tightened. "You knew." She nodded. "They looped me in for scheduling coverage. That's all." "Coverage?" I repeated. "You scheduled my replacement while I was still flying?" She didn't answer. I walked into our room. Stared at the framed photos on our dresser. Me in uniform. Her at the airport. Our trip to Alaska, where I flew her in a private jet for our anniversary. I realized, in that moment, that even those memories were tainted now. How long had she been helping them phase me out? Was this months in the making? A year? Longer? The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the indifference. She didn't fight for me. She didn't even look sad. It was like she had already buried the man I used to be. That night, I packed a bag. Not out of rage. Not out of revenge. Just clarity. When a plane goes into free fall, the first thing you do is stabilize. You don't scream. You don't panic. You correct. You take control. And that's what I had to do now. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to break. They thought they'd taken everything. But they forgot one thing. I'm still a pilot. And you don't ground a man who knows how to fly through fire. For the first few days, I felt nothing. I wandered through the world like a man caught between two timelines, one where I was a respected captain and another where I had become invisible. Just another washed-up name they erased from the logs. But beneath the silence, something was brewing. Revenge. Not the kind that comes from anger or pride. The kind that rises from clarity, when you realize they didn't just fire you. They erased you. And now, they needed to be reminded who they were messing with. I started with the files. You see, in all my years as a captain, I kept copies of everything. Every flight report, every procedural anomaly, every quiet email that came from upper management asking me to bend the rules to keep flights on schedule. I kept them. Why? Because I knew this day might come. And I wasn't going down alone. I began organizing the documents, highlighting where they made safety compromises, where unqualified pilots were pushed through training, where reports were altered to keep metrics clean. I even had recordings. Voicemails from ops directors pressuring me to fly despite mechanical warnings. Texts from Ellie asking me to ignore a failed cabin pressure test because maintenance already cleared it verbally. Each one was now a loaded weapon. But I didn't rush. I was strategic. I hired a digital forensics guy, someone ex-CIA, who knew how to clean metadata and anonymize sources. I wanted every leak to be perfect, irrefutable. I created a burner email and started dripping documents to a retired FAA safety auditor I'd met 5 years ago. The guy owed me a favor. I'd helped him during a Madeira crisis when his daughter was flying with a crew I trained. He remembered. And when he saw what I sent him, he didn't just react. He lit a fire. This could trigger a full federal review, he said. Gil, if even a quarter of this is real, you're about to shake up the entire damn system. I said just one thing. All of it is real. Meanwhile, I tracked Ellie. Not in a stalker way. In a truth-seeking way. She had quietly transferred to a new role at a partner airline. Same owners, different branding. I found out she got a promotion, a fat bonus, and an apartment paid for by a discretionary staff relocation fund. They were rewarding her for setting me up. But the most disgusting part? I found a private Slack group. One of my old co-pilots tipped me off. They called it the Shift Club, a group of managers and insiders who coordinated the offboarding of old birds. That's what they called experienced captains. Old birds. They joked about how much salary they saved each time they fired a senior pilot and replaced them with a younger one. Ellie was in that group. So was the HR woman who smiled as she offered me severance. They didn't just end my career. They mocked it. That's when I stopped planning and started acting. I scheduled a meeting with a major investigative journalist in aviation safety. Someone who had a history of taking down corrupt executives and FAA manipulators. We met in a hotel lounge. I slid a hard drive across the table. This will take down 3 airlines and expose one of the biggest frauds in commercial aviation history, I said. He smiled. You want revenge? He asked. No, I replied. I want truth. But I won't lie. Watching them burn will be a nice bonus. He took the drive. And 3 days later, the first headline hit. Whistleblower reveals shocking safety violations across major airlines. FAA investigating. It went viral in 6 hours. Within a week, Subpoenas were flying. Investigators were raiding the airline HQ. Flight logs were seized. NDAs were challenged. I wasn't named, not yet. But inside the building, they knew. They knew it was me. Ellie tried to reach out. She called 3 times. I didn't answer. She texted, "We need to talk. This is serious." I replied with just 4 words. "You picked your side." She didn't respond again. And here's the twist. I wasn't done. Because this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about taking back the sky. A friend of mine, a retired pilot who ran a charter school, reached out after the news broke. He said, "You want to fly again? Not commercial, but something better." He offered me a role training future pilots. Young ones. Dreamers. People who wanted to fly, not play corporate games. I took it. And on my first day, I stood before a group of fresh cadets. They looked at me like a legend. Because by now, the story had spread. The captain who got grounded and then exposed the sky. As I stood there, I said, "Never let a system define your altitude. Planes fly through storms. So can you. But don't think this is the end. Because my final move? It's still loading. There's something poetic about silence before a storm. It's not loud. It doesn't scream. It just waits. And then it hits with a force that reshapes everything." That's exactly what happened to Ellie. It didn't happen in a dramatic explosion. No. It was slow, strategic, surgical, and absolutely deserved. After the whistleblower reports went viral, I stayed out of the public eye. The journalists respected my anonymity. But inside the industry, word had already spread. Every insider knew who took down the system. And they knew Ellie was at the heart of it. For weeks, she tried to play innocent. She issued statements, claimed she had no idea about safety issues. She blamed the department heads, then claimed she was just following protocol. But the documents I had leaked, they had her name, her digital signature, her approval stamps on illegal flight plans. And worse, those messages from the Slack group, the ones where they laughed about removing old birds? Ellie's name was all over them. There was no escape. Then came the audit. The FAA sent in its most brutal review board. Independent, uncompromising. And they didn't come to ask questions. They came with handcuffs in the briefcase. It started with a suspension. Then her name was scrubbed from the company website. Then her ID was deactivated. And finally, one morning, she walked into the building and security told her, "You've been terminated. Please step aside." Just like they had done to me. But now it was her turn to feel it. A friend inside corporate sent me the footage from the security cameras. Ellie standing in the lobby, frozen, staring at her badge in disbelief. For the first time, the woman who played God realized she was just a pawn. I watched the clip 3 times, and then I deleted it, because I didn't need to gloat. Justice had already spoken. But here's where it got deeper. She didn't just lose her job. The FAA investigation blacklisted her. No airline in the country would touch her. Her credentials? Suspended indefinitely. Her LinkedIn? Flooded with hate. Comments like, "You're the reason people don't trust pilots. How many lives did you risk for a promotion? Hope it was worth it." And her little inner circle? They vanished. No one backed her up. Because when the ship sinks, the rats run first. One night I got a call. Unknown number. I picked up. It was Ellie. Her voice was shaky. Weak. Nothing like the powerful woman who once stabbed me in the back with a corporate smile. She said, "You destroyed me." I stayed silent. Then she whispered, "Why did you do it?" I finally spoke. "You already know." She didn't respond. So I added, "I didn't destroy you, Ellie. You did that yourself. I just made sure the world saw it." And I hung up. That was the last time we ever spoke. She disappeared after that. Deleted her social media. Moved out of state. Some say she tried to apply for jobs in Europe. Others say she changed her name. I don't care. Because her name is now a cautionary tale. Inside aviation, they use it as a verb. Don't pull an Ellie. It means, don't trade loyalty for ambition. Don't compromise integrity for power. Don't forget that every system can fall, especially when it's built on betrayal. And me? I found peace. I kept training the next generation of pilots. On my wall, I framed the headline from that first article. "One captain's fight to save the skies." Below it, I wrote a single line. "They took my wings, so I built my own runway." Because in the end, they tried to silence me. But I became louder than ever. They tried to erase me. But I became unforgettable. They tried to end my story. But I turned it into a legacy. It's been nearly a year since Ellie was fired. A whole year since the chaos that flipped my life upside down. I won't lie, the first few months were the hardest. Every day felt like a battle against the ghosts of my past, memories of flying the same planes, working with the same crew, and that crushing betrayal lurking behind every smile. But over time, something changed. I stopped looking back. I stopped asking why. Instead, I asked myself, what's next? I found a new path, training young pilots at a flight school, far from corporate politics and broken promises. Every day, I see their eyes light up when they master a new skill. Their trust reminds me what flying really means: responsibility, passion, and honor. This whole ordeal taught me a lesson stronger than any flight manual. Sometimes, the hardest storms clear the skies for new beginnings. I lost my job. I lost trust. But I didn't lose myself. In fact, I found a new purpose. And that's the real victory. If there's one thing I want you to remember from my story, it's this. No matter how many times life grounds you, you always have the power to take off again. Your past doesn't define you. Your scars don't weaken you. They prepare you for the flight ahead. So here I am. Not just a pilot anymore. A teacher. A fighter. A man who rebuilt his wings, stronger and wiser. And to anyone out there feeling betrayed or broken, listen closely. Your story isn't over. It's just beginning. Thank you for listening. If you want to hear more stories like mine, stories of truth, courage, and comeback, hit that subscribe button. Remember, they took everything from me, except my soul.